Welcome to Lasting Impressions with Lauren, the podcast where we explore the art of making a memorable impact in every encounter. I'm your host, Lauren Hanna, Director of First Impressions at Real News PR. Join me each week as we sit down with a diverse range of guests, from industry leaders to everyday influencers, to explore their insights, experiences, and strategies for making memorable impressions. So whether you're looking to enhance your professional presence, elevate your personal brand, or simply leave a positive impact on those around you, this is your go-to destination for all things impression management. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered to make every interaction count. Welcome to the podcast where impressions aren't just made, they last. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Lasting Impressions with Lauren. I am so excited about my guest today. Her name is Summer Pailet. She is an executive coach and leadership development coach. Super excited for this conversation. Summer, how are you today?
Great. I am so happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Of course. You have built a remarkable career in leadership coaching, executive coaching. So I just wanted to start this off by asking you, what was it that initially sparked your passion for what you're doing now?
Thank you for asking. Actually, I think that I have always had a passion for people, just people. I'm curious. I want to know about them. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what makes me tick. So I think early on, I've always had a big curiosity. As a child, I actually went to a different school every single year, through elementary and then middle school, and then through high school. I stayed the course of 3 years straight. But I think just having exposure to different people from all walks of life has just kept me curious. My major actually was psychology, but I have a fashion merchandising minor, and that's where I leaped first from.
So I guess what kind of brought you from, because I know we had talked on our first chat, you had talked about your experience in apparel and all of that. And so what was sparked like the shift and the change and the leap into coaching?
Yeah. So it really started that I had a dear friend who kept inviting me into her business to do some contract work, and also her doing her own team retreats. And so she finally said, look, come join me because you would be amazing. You are so curious about people and you're always looking, for the potential in others. And I think you would be fabulous. And so I was really kind of at the tail end of what I call my first life in the apparel industry for a good 25 years. Yeah. And recognizing that I was kind of going full circle, because while I was a psychology major and not necessarily using it, I was using it, right, in the everyday life in the apparel business. But really that was focusing more on the outside in versus the inside out. And then coming to this leadership development space of communication, of emotional and social intelligence, of personal branding, all of these elements, that is from the inside out. And so I really came full circle into it that way. Probably it's been now 15 years ago. And I really went headfirst in that leadership space, facilitating and acquiring different tools. And then recognized that I was also doing some coaching. And I thought, well, I better get certified. So my certification in coaching is actually through Marshall Goldsmith, stakeholder-centric coaching.
Yeah. And I think as this industry develops, there are more and more tools that can be used in the coaching process. What are some of your favorites to use with your clients?
Oh, gosh. So, I go back and forth. Many people will ask me, what do you prefer? Do you want to coach? Is that really your space, or do you want to facilitate? And it's funny because I can't choose. I don't want to choose. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have to choose. I get to do both. And it really is a get to. Being in a room or on a virtual room, let's say, full of people who are hungry. They have an appetite to stretch themselves. And I often say, get ready because I'm going to stretch you into your greatness. That's, one of my favorite taglines because it's not comfortable. And whether it is through a leadership development program that they come through as a cohort, or it's one-to-one executive individual coaching, that has just fulfilled me so much because I am able to give over different tools that I have learned along the way. And, really thinking about there's different modalities and methodologies with coaching. Stakeholder centric, as I mentioned, is something that, where my certification comes from. But there's all forms of coaching, right? Different modes. And I think that one of the things that I offer that's most valuable is really an aspect of situational coaching, meaning I don't necessarily have this set agenda. And with one-to-one coaching, it's about where are you holding right now? What is it that you need that you can be more successful yourself, your team, and with your organization? So there's a few different models that I like to use, whether it's using something called the LEAPS model, which is more about active listening, whether it's utilizing some of my tools from Brene Brown. So I don't know if you're familiar with, okay, I figured you were. Dr. Brene Brown authored Dare to Lead, and she is just a master in so many things. So during the pandemic, I actually had the opportunity to get Dare to Lead trained. Wow. So I also use a lot of those nuggets in my coaching practice. And so it's kind of like having this arsenal of being equipped. But what's really important is you have to know what tool to use when. We can have lots of things in our kitchen, right? We can have lots of gadgets and all the things, but if we don't really know which one to pull out when, it's not necessarily such a great thing.
Right.
It can just be dead weight.
Right. So you tailor your coaching depending on whether one, it's a group or an individual, and then of course, like what they're in need of, and then you can kind of change your approach. Absolutely. On the situation.
Absolutely. Adaptability, I think, is key, especially in our ever-changing world.
Right.
It's huge.
Yeah, definitely. So as you're pouring into everybody else, what do you do for Summer? Do you have like a daily practice of just, kind of centering yourself? And I find that people who give a lot need to especially focus on themselves a lot of the time and just recenter. I know you have spent a lot of time in Costa Rica, and you talked to me about how that was a big part of a healing journey, and just really, we just said it before the podcast, you have to deconnect to reconnect.
Yes. So, disconnect to reconnect. That's right.
Yes.
It's so true.
Yeah. So just talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, one thing that happened certainly during the pandemic, it taught us, many of us, that we could do our work virtually. And so that was probably a really incredible gift that I had no idea where it would actually lead to. And so we decided in 2022 that we were going to launch to Costa Rica, thinking, let's go do a year in Costa Rica. My youngest was not starting high school yet. And we thought, what a cool, amazing adventure. And I could certainly work virtually and then commute. And that's an easy commute back to Dallas, to the Dallas area anyway. And so we did really end up going and recognizing it quickly that it was truly a healing journey in lots of ways. My husband did have a heart attack in 2020. And so we were still kind of working with the aftermath of the dynamics of that, right? Of, wow, we're so fortunate to be alive every day. And, what do we want to do with ourselves? And so going to Costa Rica, really, we thought was more about for our son to have this amazing adventure, but we actually had our own journey and adventure as well. And, one of my biggest daily practice is yoga, frankly. Yeah. We live in such a fast-paced world, especially here in Dallas. Things are coming at us constantly and when you're in that space, right, on your mat, it actually slows everything down. And that's a beautiful thing with how much anxiety we are all ridden with, whether we recognize it or not. But yoga has been a huge thing. I think one of the biggest surprises is I didn't realize how much that I have connected with nature and how important that is. I had previously been a big believer of grounding, and I know there's benefits and healing benefits to grounding, but when we ground, like truly like getting out and going barefoot in your front yard, it's so important. I've had some of my coachees, I'm like, okay, go outside right now for 15 minutes. get some sunshine, some vitamin D, listen to the birds,
Right.
right? Just pause. And we don't pause enough and create white space for ourselves to be able to be introspective, right? About what just occurred. And then also be future forward thinking about how do I want to show up next? So I think that's really important to pause.
Yeah, definitely. Is that something that you, I guess, adapted from your time in Costa Rica? Just kind of.
I knew it was important, but I actually started walking the talk.
Right.
Once I was in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
So that was a really beautiful departure.
Yeah.
You know, to pause, really.
Yeah. And you do, like you said, pass that along to some of your people that you're coaching and just say like, hey, like maybe you've never tried this before, but
absolutely,
it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah. Even breathing, the 4 square breathing,
Mm-hmm.
We hear about it all the time. Brene Brown talks about it.
Yeah.
It really is a real thing to stop, take some breaths, right? And it slows down your parasympathetic nervous system. And we need to be able to do that more than ever. Being able to coach ourselves, I think is incredibly important. And I know that when we look at organizations out there, the most successful organizations are those that are adapting and adopting a coaching culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really key for success.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's funny, I work in a very dynamic environment. I get to meet a lot of different people every day. And I had no idea how big the coaching industry was until I started this job. We work with a lot of different coaches, and I've been blessed to be able to pick a lot of brains of people who coach. And it's really fascinating to me how many tools there are and how many different, specifications. I mean, it's just really fascinating. But I think that we should take advantage of how prevalent coaching is today and integrate it into everyday life, whether it's, like you said, coaching yourself in the moment, but then also being able to be coached.
Yes.
So I think that that's really cool and really powerful. My aunt is how we met. So she worked at Alchemy, and you were working with them, and she still to this day, she's like, anytime there's a big change in my career, I'm calling Summer.
She does.
Yeah.
She does. And I had the opportunity to coach with her, and, she was open and hungry and wanted to grow herself. Mm-hmm. So that's my favorite kind of candidate, is somebody who wants to become better and really expand.
Yeah. Do you find, or have you ever worked with people, and I'm sure you have, but do they take a little bit to start really seeing the benefits, or does it take them a bit to kind of really get into it?
So it depends who it is, right? How open they are. What were the circumstances that brought them to this coaching engagement, for example? But most of the time, I usually have something good up my sleeve for a first connect, whether it's a really cool assessment, which I had you take.
Yes.
One of the assessments that is in my arsenal, Predictive Index, and it's an amazing tool. And so whether it is somebody who needs more data, that is always helpful. But also, I find that, this idea of coaching, way back when, it was more of a remedial, almost like, you're in trouble, let's get some coaching for you. And I think that fortunately there's been such a shift, and thankfully, especially our younger generation, recognizing, oh no, I want all the professional development I can get.
Yeah.
And I always say yes, because you take you wherever you go. And but when you look at some of, even professional athletes, for example, I'll never forget one of my clients. We had a coaching engagement. The engagement ended after about 8-9 months. And he said, okay, I want to keep going. I need to ask my leader. And he said, how do you think I should position it? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. You watch football. Do they have coaches on the football field? Yes. How many coaches do they have? Well, lots. Well, if you think about it, even, they're all specified coaches, right? For the special teams.
Yeah.
Well, even if they win the Super Bowl, are they going to stop coaching? So you've hit your mark, right? You've exceeded expectations. You've got the promotion now. Why would you stop coaching?
Why stop there? Right.
No, you may need a break, right? and regroup and then realign again. But why stop?
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's makes all the sense in the world, right?
Yeah.
And
well, especially when you give it to a guy and you give him sports,
exactly
that analogy. Then it's like ding, ding, ding. Oh, of course.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Actually, I want to share, I wrote down a couple notes because specifically on coaching.
Yeah.
This is from ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation. And 70% of individuals who have received coaching reported improved work performance, relationships, and communication styles. 70%.
Wow.
It's a very high number. As far as self-confidence, which I come across quite a bit, they also reported that 80% of coaching clients experienced increased self-confidence.
Wow.
And then lastly, engagement, which I talk to my organizations all the time about employee engagement. Organizations that offer coaching to their executives, they actually experience 32% higher employee engagement and retention.
Wow.
So those are, to me, those are big numbers that are saying, hey, this is important.
Absolutely.
Why would you not do this?
Absolutely.
And I happen to think as well, there's a lot there with just the whole synergy between work performance and mental health.
Yes.
And mental well-being.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a need.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because when you were saying earlier about how, you cater or specify the different needs to the different client or the different individual, a lot of times it does start with mental health and what are you, because issues in mental health show up in different areas of life, especially work. I mean,
we're there most of the time.
Of the day.
Yeah. You're in it.
Yeah.
If you're not there at it, I always say, well, you're in it almost 24/7.
Yeah, definitely. And so I know too that your coaching style as far as leadership goes, like interpersonal skills, social intelligence, mental intelligence. And so do you find that, like the stat you just read, 30% higher engagement, do you think that the increase in interpersonal skills, do you think that has to do with that increase in engagement? Like if you feel like you're connected with your leader,
100%.
you're going to be more engaged.
I know it to be true. Right. You can look at any of the Gallup polling. Mm-hmm. They're excellent about sharing over the most updated stats on that. Absolutely. And I also, big disclaimer here, when I think about this, I'm not a PhD, but I do say, well, this is good business therapy, if nothing else. Yeah. Maybe it's not, real therapy, but it's business therapy. So it's important.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, too, teaching emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. How do you necessarily approach that? If that's something that, because some people are gifted with it,
sure.
Right?
Sure.
For someone who's maybe trying to hone in that skill, how would you take that approach?
Well, there's assessments that are out there, number one, mm-hmm. which I think is really key.
Right.
That there's access to just kind of see where do you score on your own self-management and how you manage others. I think one of the biggest, most important things, even thinking about coaching and or leading a cohort, right? The idea here is, what is our own self-perception, right? That's awareness, right? How much awareness do we have about how are we showing up? And then the other part of that is, how much awareness do we have on how are we landing on others? And usually there's a gap. And the key here is identifying what that gap, how wide is that gap?
Right.
And then starting to work towards closing that gap. And I like to say, when I'm coaching, and Soulpreneur, by the way, SOUL, is someone who chooses to shine their light in a soul-driven career. And so, I feel like it is an honor that I get to shine my light, right, on someone about what are some things there that maybe are stopping or stalling them, getting in their way of being successful. Most of the time it's ourselves, right? And really starting to shift the perspective of how are they showing up. And it's through behavioral change, right? We have to modify our behavior to adapt. And hopefully we're doing that in a way that's the most successful for everyone around us.
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. So glad you mentioned Soulpreneur. So you started Soulpreneur in 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was actually right at like 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so talk about Soulpreneur,
Sure.
how it
Sure.
started, and where we're at today.
Okay. So Soulpreneur, when I was thinking about names, that's super important to me. And anything that has kind of a multi-dimensional meaning is always.
All goes into branding,
Yes,
right? You
of
want to have
course.
that thing that sticks.
Of course.
Yeah.
But also something that really spoke to my heart.
For sure.
So really thinking about a soulpreneur, that spoke to me because I want to be always in my most authentic self, and being able to help share over whatever it is I have to give, and really thinking of myself more as a vessel for someone else. And in doing so, the name came, and with the two biggest letters there, the S and the P, which, my last name is Pailet, so Summer Pailet. But then it was really this concept that I wanted to grow of bringing together other collaborative partners.
Yes.
My colleagues that are in my sphere that I believe to be high caliber coaches, facilitators, or graphic facilitators, people in this world, because lots of people can call themselves a coach. There's lots of, like you said, different kinds of coaching. And there's life coaching and business coaching and all the things. And so the Soulpreneur Consortium actually came to be by me just creating and bringing together a connection of people who have shared values that are in my circle of influence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was just on my last podcast, I was talking about how shared stories and shared experiences can be so powerful. And so I think it's great that you're building a community to talk about the things. And so talk about some of your partners and different things you have going on in the consortium.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So a lot of those are actually independent contributors. They have their own businesses.
Yes.
And so, it's always intriguing to learn, right? I have to keep learning to keep myself relevant.
Right.
And being able to be able to share over, right, what's needed in that moment, or help somebody find the right person, because if it's not me, maybe it's someone else who has expertise in their wheelhouse differently than I do. As far as some of my collaborative partners that I work with, there's one called Talent Suite that's here in the area, and they are a dynamic group of women. I seem to associate myself with women quite frequently.
Love that.
I think that's because I have 3 boys and 2 young adults and 1 still in high school, but, got to have the girl power, right? So I can work with those boys at any age.
Absolutely.
So that's Talent Suite, and they do consulting services. So I'm really an extension of their leadership development arm, as well as their coach that kind of sits on their bench.
Okay.
The other one that I'm super excited about that is really kind of a new partner for me is called Achieve Unite. And they have a really cool assessment called PQI.
Okay.
And that is all about how do we build trust. So it is an assessment, and there are 5 different profiles. And it is all about how do we build trust with our team? How do we build trust with our colleagues, with our clients even? And I think trust building is so important this day and age. We have to be able to trust ourselves, understand ourselves more. And I think that trust is a big issue. It's a big issue in our country, right?
Sure.
In our world at a macro level, much less at a micro level.
Right.
So really excited about where that can take me and take my future clients, because they are global, and they have a very interesting concept on their app that also offers an AI component. And so eventually it may build to something like maybe something like having Summer in your back pocket if you need a little coaching.
Yes, and I would love to have
meeting.
Summer in my back pocket. So I'm so excited about this new project. So did you take the PQI
I did.
assessment?
I did.
So did you find anything, about yourself and about the way you trust or trust yourself that maybe in a past experience in your career could have shifted the result?
It was interesting. There's a couple of different ones. As I said, there's 5. I really thought I was going to show up first as an energizer, because that is typical of my profile of how I know I am outwardly. My highest score rating, because we're all of them, I am a harmonizer. And a harmonizer is actually one who has an intuitiveness and who stays calm, cool under pressure, especially when building trust. So high pressure situations, for example, it showed that my EQ was very high. I have to attribute that to I get to do this kind of work every day.
Yeah.
So I'm tested constantly, right? And stretched.
Absolutely. No, that's so awesome. I want to take the PQI.
Yes, you're going to.
Yes. So super excited about that. Because, like we were talking about earlier, trust is huge. Yes. Trust is huge, especially within a team.
Oh my goodness.
If you aren't, with yourself as well, of course, but with your coworkers, with your managers, the leadership in your company, there needs to be some level of trust in whatever ways. I think if that can improve, strengthen, the better for everyone.
Absolutely.
So I'm so excited to learn more about that.
And listen, if we don't have trust, it doesn't give us permission or the opportunity to really be vulnerable, to really be in our authentic self, without judgment.
Right.
So it's a whole segue.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, we don't have connection. And if we don't have connection, we don't have meaning. We don't have purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
do you find, looking back in your career, maybe some of the earlier years, do you find, wishing like, I wish I would have known what I know now?
Kidding?
Yeah.
Say it all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Hindsight's a funny thing. And you really can't have it until you're past it and looking back, truly. So we can beat ourselves up and guilt ourselves and all the things. Brene Brown talks a bit about, doing the best you can in the moment that you're in. And so I choose to believe that, right? Everything is a choice.
For sure.
And so I just have to know I did the best I could. But boy, all the things that are now out with even how we understand the brain, I am a little bit giddy about neuroplasticity and the neuroscience, and I'm a big believer in us really being able to create new neural pathways. And it's about forming new habits, right? But we know so much more now. So much more is exposed now than what I knew in the first part of my life.
Yeah. It's so exciting. It's so exciting, especially I imagine for you that you get to share this with people. Do you find yourself, do you feel like you're a giver? Do you feel like you are like a developer wanting to do you feel like that's the nature of who you are?
Yes, I think that there's such a fulfillment that happens, whether it is in a one-to-one coaching. I will get off a call and I will be just swelled with joy, right? Or feeling really good. And it goes beyond just an ego stroke, right? I can identify what that is, but it's really knowing that I made a difference in someone's life, that they're doing something different and they feel in their power and empowered. So that is super fulfilling to me when I get to do that. And I see it in the leadership cohorts as well. When that happens, and just watching how people get those aha moments, there's really nothing better.
Yeah.
There's nothing better.
Yeah. I can definitely see that for sure. Just the satisfying feeling, and it's all about leaving a lasting impression, right?
Yes, it is.
And that's why I love talking to people and just figuring out, what really lights you up. And so I think that that's awesome that you get such a satisfaction and just like a happiness from doing that for doing it for other people. So let's see. I want to talk a little bit more about Costa Rica because I just think it's so cool. I feel like you are so inspiring and just like, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go and I'm going to do this for myself. And so you spent 2 years there. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. 2 years, like almost to the day, 2 years. It's a very special place. I met a lot of different healers. And when I say healers, I truly mean like people who are givers, like you're mentioning.
Yeah.
They are just truly, it It just comes,
Yeah.
whether they are an acupuncture, whether they are a chiropractor, whether they work with plant medicine, whether they work with tinctures. I don't know if you're familiar with tinctures, but it's actually plants that are derived into a liquid format.
Oh, wow.
So I had psoriasis before I left, and I was taking some heavy duty prescription medications. And while I was in Costa Rica, I met someone, a doctor who was integrative health. And so she actually had me start on tinctures, and I'm no longer taking any prescription pharma medication, as well as, I mean, whether it's Reiki, whether it's, there's just so many different modalities that people choose because it's almost like an energy vortex there.
Yeah.
It's super amazing. And there's a phrase that's called pura vida, and it means pure life. And it's not just like saying hello, goodbye. It truly is a lifestyle. And it's really beautiful. We had the opportunity to live like right on the cusp of the blue zone. If you're familiar with any of the blue zones.
I'm not.
So there's 5 blue zones around the world, and Costa Rica is one of them. This is where they are finding the longest living people.
Wow.
Most healthy, longest living people on the earth, on the planet. You got to do a whole show on the blue zones.
Yeah.
There's a Netflix series. Go look. It's amazing. They do it on all the countries.
I'll definitely have to check it out.
It's super cool.
Fascinating.
But I've always been drawn to a little bit more of a spiritual bohemian way.
For sure.
And so it really opened my eyes to the idea that the universe, God, our higher power, has really given us so many things. It's all right here, but we're missing it so often. We're missing the most important things.
Definitely. And I just think it's so cool that you did that and got to learn from a different way of life. And do you think,
so humbling.
Yeah.
I don't speak Spanish. And so to go and be, number one, a white woman, not speaking Spanish, and granted, we lived in a heavy populated expat area, but it makes you start to realize like, wow, how do people feel different? You know, when you start thinking about inclusion and tolerance and all the things. And what I really came to find is, even working with my housekeeper, and we did not speak. I mean, she didn't speak English. I didn't speak Spanish, but we'd have the translator out. We had more laughs, crying, laughing about different things, miscommunication or just sense of humor. And, when you start thinking about prejudice, right?
Right.
When you just break it down, when you're one-to-one sitting with another human being, what do we all want? We just all want to be seen.
Right.
We just want to be heard.
Yeah.
So that was really cool just to be in that space.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm the minority here. Right?
Absolutely. It definitely opens your mind. And, just I can only imagine how humbling that is, and being able to take back everything you learn. It just really makes you a better person overall.
Yeah.
And so what things, because obviously it's a very different world here in Dallas, Texas.
Yes.
So what things have you taken here or taken back home with you from Costa Rica? Is there any practices or anything like that?
So, there's a lot to be said about the indigenous people in Costa Rica, and I was able to attend, and I'm a big lover of any kind of women's circle.
Yes.
And so one of my goals here is actually to bring women's circles here using something that they called cacao. Okay. So you can check out what cacao is. Yeah. It's it's been known as a type of coffee, a chocolate. And so there's different ways, but cacao is a plant. It's from a plant, and it is a heart opener. And there's no psychedelics to it or anything like that. But you sip and drink like this cacao in ceremony in a women's circle. And it's typically done at the new moon or a full moon ceremony. And it's just a beautiful way to pause, to disconnect, to reconnect, and to really just have some reflection time and to slow down. And that's self-care.
Yeah.
We all need some of that for sure. So that's definitely one thing that is on my part of my mission to kind of bring here. The other thing I'd like to do is actually start to figure out a way to have And at first I was calling them leadership retreats or women's retreats to Costa Rica.
Oh, I love that.
So that would be my biggest, my big dream is to start creating these women's retreats to Costa Rica, having some leadership elements to it, but also self-care elements to it, right? Whether it's to journal, whether it's to have different speakers, whether it's to have different topics about what's really relevant and happening in our lives. How are we managing all of these things, especially as women, being in the workplace, being married, having children, being active in philanthropy, for example, and social causes. It's a lot, right? Yeah. There's a lot spinning on those plates. And being able to, wait, let's take a time out, right? And let's refuel. And so that's kind of where I'd like to take it, take people there.
That's so exciting. I want to, I guess, wrap up because you said something at the beginning when we were first kind of talking, and I wrote it down, head, heart, briefcase. But it's almost like a mind, body, spirit kind of play, right?
Yes.
And so talk about what that means as it pertains, because really what we're talking about is that it's all interconnected.
Yes, holistic approach.
Yes.
So head, heart, and briefcase refers to kind of my approach, that methodology in coaching and in leadership development, that we've got that headspace, which represents our data analytic, whether it's PI, predictive index, or PQI, or Myers-Briggs, or StrengthsFinders, or what have you, right? And that lives in that headspace, and it typically is the same over time. It doesn't really change. But we have to recognize that's not the only lens that we look through. And many of us that, we talk about what is in that briefcase. That's most of the time in the business world, what we see, what's somebody's resume.
Right.
And oftentimes I say what's in that briefcase actually could be some baggage that we need to unpack, because it's stuff that maybe served us then, but it's no longer serving us now. Maybe some bad habits and leadership, for example. So we got to unpack that. But the other thing that we need to recognize is, how are we showing up every day in our heart space? Are we showing our heart space? What's our core values? And I always lead off any of my coaching engagements with a values exercise that stems from Marshall Goldsmith's work. And if we know what our core values really are, defining them, then any decision, especially the hard ones, are much easier to make, right? And so, yes, looking in that business world of head, heart, and briefcase, and now kind of, I think my trajectory is moving even forward with the alignment of, what you just said about body, soul, spirit,
mind, body, spirit,
spirit, and how that interrelates, right, as we move through our everyday. Because we're not just one person over here and another person over there, right? We need to fully integrate into that and really be the light that we were meant to be.
Absolutely. And I feel like I could continue talking to you forever. And I think that was a great place to end, just to leave people with that. I think you're so inspiring. Everything that you're looking to do and looking to bring what you've learned in Costa Rica here, what you've learned just throughout your career, and looking to give it to other people so that they can live in their purpose and be the light that they want to be too, is absolutely beautiful. And so I just want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing everything. And I look forward to our next visit.
Me too. Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome. Thank you, Summer.